Hey folks, this is the fourth and final part of my video series covering the Persona series of games, but only the last three because I'm a scrub with bad taste. So we're coming in on Persona 5 now, which is for now the most recent installment in the series. It reached critical acclaim in the West and brought Persona firmly into the mainstream. The interface gained a lot of notoriety, and some people even cosplayed it because it was just that good. I'm going to be talking, as with the previous parts, about the characters in this game and the plot and story, such that it is. It's actually quite a good story. It just undermines itself pretty severely in some fairly major junctures, but I'm still fond of it. This was my first Persona game, as I think it is for many modern Persona fans, and even though it's not currently my main fandom, it still holds a very good place in my heart. I may not own the game, but I own a lot of official merchandise, so I definitely feel like I'm qualified to speak as a fan, both on a financial dedication level and a critical engagement level. So, the plot and the setting for this game. We're back in the city, but we're in a real city this time. The previous two games have been set in pretend locations. In this game, we are in actual Tokyo. The maps in the game are based on real places in Tokyo, and you can navigate them with your knowledge of Tokyo if you've been there. And you can also navigate Tokyo with your knowledge of Persona 5, as some people have proven. The year setting, so here's the thing. Persona games are typically set 2 years ahead of when they're released. So Persona 4 was set in 2011, but it was released in 2009. Persona 5 was originally supposed to come out in 2014. The problem is there were so many delays in the development that release ended up getting pushed back to 2016. The problem there is that you start getting into legal trouble if the events in your game seem to mirror too closely events in real life that most importantly involved real people who could sue you for defamation if they think that it's supposed to be a representation of them, especially in a game like Persona 5 where you are exploring like corrupt politicians and corrupt businessmen and things like that. So throughout the game, the year is referred to as 20XX, but the calendar and the general theme of the previous game's dates and the original intended release date for Persona 5 strongly suggests that the year is 2016. So it's 2016. Technology reflects it, the state of world affairs reflects it, it's 2016. The game opens really suddenly into an action sequence, and puts you straight into the middle of it. As the main character, you're interacting with, other people in your party that, are described by how their voices sound, because you can only hear them on voice comms. You don't know their names yet, and it's sort of a point of view segment, because at this stage in the game, you're effectively recalling what's just happened. That led you to be thrown in a jail cell and arrested and interrogated. The first sort of 2/3 of the game is in this format of a recollection of what got you to this stage. So it will keep touching base with what's happening in the jail cell interrogation, and then flash back to the actual gameplay segments where you're sort of reliving the first half of your school year leading up to your arrest. But the fun thing is the protagonist's actually been arrested before. Right at the very beginning of the game, when he was in his first year of high school, he saw a stranger about to be sexually assaulted in the street, and did what any decent person would do and ran interference. Unfortunately, the person performing the assault was very drunk and fell over. And he then decided that it would be a good idea to have this teenager who interfered arrested and convicted of assaulting him and pushing him when actually there was no pushing involved. The protagonist is then sent away from his original school and transferred to a school in the center of Tokyo. He's effectively living with a genuine stranger. In Persona 4, it was still a family member even if you didn't know them. In Persona 5, it's literally like a friend of your parents that you've been sent to live with. Ever since the protagonist arrived in Tokyo, though, strange things have been happening. He's been seeing strange things. There's been strange things on his phone. So just to recap, the game begins on an action sequence in which the main character is arrested and taken to a holding cell where he's interrogated. He then flashes back to the previous time when he was wrongfully arrested for preventing a sexual assault and sentenced to a year of conditional discharge. He's then transferred to Tokyo, where he continues to recollect for the interrogator on the second arrest what got him up to the point of him being arrested the second time. So he starts his new school in April. On his first day there, he gets quite badly lost. So I'm going to include the link to this video in the description. I strongly recommend that you watch it because it's the thing that got me into the Persona franchise at all, full stop. After the protagonist awakens to his persona, he escapes from this strange dimension that he's found himself in, and the boy who he saved, they form an agreement that they want to work out what's going on, and how the alternative dimension is related to the real world, and if there's anything they can do about this horrible teacher who is terrorizing their school. So the core themes of Persona 5, huge themes of all kinds of abuse, more or less, almost all derided as bad things done by bad people, but there are also some bad taste jokes in the game, largely revolving around sexual harassment and occasionally physical assault, are treated by the writers as though they are a punchline, which rings really badly with the rest of the plot as it is. There's another conspiracy that we get to uncover. It's a different one if you've played Persona 3. It's not related to the Persona 3 conspiracy. It does have some plot twists. Some of the quote-unquote plot twists you see coming from a mile off, those aren't the plot twists you need to watch for, as it were. Those are almost they're real plot twists, but they're almost sort of red herrings. There are optional romances, like with Persona 4. You can pursue platonic social links with the girls if you want to continue the social link without romancing them. Some of the girls aren't very happy about it, but you can do it and the game won't punish you further. If you choose to romance more than one girl at once, the game will guilt trip you, but it won't punish you mechanically. All of the available romances are with girls, and some of them are with adults. You play as the 16, 17-year-old protagonist, and you can date a doctor, a teacher, a journalist, sort of adult women in roles around you. So the playable characters, the party members, a couple of them you might consider to be a spoiler. I'm putting them in because I think they add significantly to the charm of the game, and to making the game an appealing prospect to play. I feel like to leave them out would be to leave out a major sort of appealing part of the game. And also, at least one of the ones that people regularly describe as a spoiler has been released from spoiler jail as of speaking time. So he was posted about on the official Atlas Twitter as a Phantom Thief. Don't at me. So the first character I'm going to talk about, as per usual, is the protagonist. It's a bit of a strange one because it almost seemed like they didn't really decide if they were going to go for a blank slate protagonist or for a protagonist with a really distinct personality. I personally am very fond of him. I feel like a lot of the almost discrepancy is almost an in-universe discrepancy where he himself is struggling to decide what to do with himself and how to handle the situation he's found in, because his situation is really fucked up. Like, he was wrongfully arrested for doing the right thing. He was sent to live with a stranger in a city that he's probably never been to for any length of time before, with nobody who he knows. And when he gets to school, someone's leaked his criminal records, so everybody knows that he's a criminal and thinks he's a delinquent, and nobody wants to be friends with him. He ends up learning how to change people's hearts. So he learns how to steal the distorted desires of people who are visiting atrocities onto others or themselves, and remove those distortions from their hearts and give them a clear view of what they've been doing for the first time in years. He uses his power both to punish evildoers primarily, but also to help people who've been manipulated, because distortion can be the result of abuse as well as the result of self-delusion. He's another wild card. He can recruit personas, he can fuse personas. You are actually forced in this game to fuse your main persona away. And partly it's a gameplay thing to say, hey dude, don't get too attached because this persona is not a good one. But also the fact that he is forced to fuse away his id is thematically very in keeping with the main plot. So this is the best friend character, similar to Junpei and Yosuke. He's a very good boy. He's quite rough around the edges, but he's incredibly kind and thoughtful and selfless to a fault. He lives with his single mother, which he's stigmatized for. He gets bullied for it in school. But he loves his mum to pieces. He tries to do her as many favours as he can. He tries to keep out of trouble specifically so that she doesn't get worried or upset. He's in the first arc of the game, he's incredibly, he views the female characters who are being sexually harassed and assaulted by this shitty teacher the same way he would view any other victim. He meets them on their level and treats them like human beings who are being abused. He sees them as fellow victims, and he's fiercely defensive of them. And then, from the second arc onwards, he kind of gets shoved by, I'm going to go ahead and call it bad writing, into being the typical kind of jokester, pervy character. And it's really not him. So, although I'll warn you that that's something that he does, I never really see it as something that, he is a character, because when you look at his actual character development arc and the way he behaves when he's core to the main plot, it's not how he behaves at all. It's almost like they put the scenes in for comic relief without thinking about how they would come across, which is kind of the main criticism I have of Persona 5 as a whole, is that when they try and do a comic relief scene, it's usually bad. Not in that it's not funny, although it isn't usually, but in that it undermines the main plot kind of themes. And I think that's one of the worst things that you can do to hamstring your story, is to make it inconsistent with itself. So this is Morgana. Morgana is incredibly important. Morgana is not a cat. Morgana is a creature who appears to the beginnings of the Phantom Thief group inside a palace in the kind of humanoid mascot form. The humanoid mascot form is about waist height, and seems to have fully opposable thumbs, and almost cartoon physics in terms of how it moves around. When they bring Morgana back into the main real world, away from the alternative dimension, Morgana takes the format of a small black and white domestic cat. They give Morgana a collar and look after him throughout the game. So officially Morgana is quote unquote a boy cat. At one stage, Cassandra Lee Morris, Morgana's English voice actor, made a comment in a panel that she believed that gender didn't really apply to Morgana and that Morgana could be considered non-binary. She was, I don't want to say forced, but encouraged by Atlas HQ to redact the statement, because it was not officially sanctioned. Take that information as you will. You'll notice on the slide itself I've referred to Morgana with they pronouns. You can use he pronouns. It's still accurate, effectively. Morgana has a gameplay thing where when you've run out of time slots of things to do in the game for a day, Morgana will say, "Oh, you must be tired, let's go to bed." But it almost comes like Morgana's telling you that you have to go to bed. So Cassandra Lee Morris did a reading of the parody quote-unquote children's storybook, Go the F to Sleep. I'll put the link in the description. It's very good to fall asleep to, unironically. So this is on Takamaki, or Takamaki, depending on whether you're listening to the dub or not. She is really inconsistently treated character. She's written very consistently. Her behaviour and her reaction to things are very consistent, but the way that the narrative frames her changes drastically from arc to arc. And she's one of the most difficult characters for me to recommend because she's amazing and I love her, but she's treated so creepily by so many scenes, in particularly after the first arc where she's featured heavily and treated with a lot of respect, and then the whiplash of suddenly she's the sort of fan service character when, like, her whole story arc was about the fact she was being sexually harassed against her will, and now the harassment is coming from the party members. Like, I just don't buy it. I don't think that that would have happened if the writers had actually taken a step back from their routine sort of how they write comic relief and thought about how it actually fitted with the themes of the game they were writing. She has a great sense of humour. She's academically average. Her scores in English are very good because I believe she lived in America for a short while. She has a best friend, who's also heavily involved in that first storyline that involves a lot of themes of different kinds of abuse. Her friend transfers schools during the course of the story, and you sort of help her come to terms with the fact that, she's going to be on her own from now on, but, it doesn't mean that she's being abandoned. You also help her, with her job as a model, where she's almost having trouble committing to the lifestyle, because she's not sure that she can sort of cut it. And you know that thing where you feel like if you don't make an effort and then you fail, then you've not lost as much as if you make an effort and then still fail. You help her deal with that and help her deal with her rivals in her business. I do recommend her as a character. I think she's very interesting. I just think that I also have to warn you that she's treated very strangely in the later sections of the story, because I don't want anyone to get blindsided by that. So this is Yusuke. He's very important. He is a bit of an oddball, in that he isn't very good at taking social cues, and he can't take a hint, he can't read the room, but he's got a very strong sense of justice. He's got a very strong sense of right and wrong. He struggles to begin with to deal with his father figure having committed some crimes. At first he denies it and tries to defend his father figure, but he comes around in the end, and he's a really good addition to the party in terms of the dynamic that he adds. He's from a different school, so he doesn't attend classes with the rest of the party, but he does spend lots of time with them outside, and it's very modern the way that they have him join in with lunchtime meetings by teleconferencing from somebody's phone. So this is Makoto. She is the favourite of the dude bro, unfortunately. She really deserves better fans, because she gets sort of moe blobbed a lot, but she's really willful and strong character. She's introduced where she struggles with standing up for herself, but there comes a breaking point after which she takes no bullshit, and I would go ahead and call her a role model, almost, because she's very strong in the face of adversity, but she's also not afraid to confess vulnerability and ask for help from her friends. She's definitely the team mum. She's got a very strong sense of responsibility. She's a student council president. She initially confronts you about being the Phantom Thieves, and threatens to turn you in, but she comes around in the end, and joins you. As with most of the female characters, including Ann, you can romance her. Her romance link is quite cute. She's interesting because she's touted as being the strategist for the Phantom Thieves, but she's actually very reckless, and tends to charge forward without thinking a lot. So I think that adds a really interesting dimension to her character. So this is Futaba. She's another fave among the dude bros, but she definitely deserves better. She's quite young, and interestingly, she's the only actual criminal among the Phantom Thieves, because she 100% has committed online bank fraud and tax evasion and all of those kinds of crimes. She's committed digital breaking and entering. She's a hacker, who actually hacks things. And she's been doing that since before she met the Phantom Thieves, so it's nothing to do with them. It's really interesting because she's easily the youngest and the smallest of the characters, but she's also the one who is most deserving of a criminal record of some kind. But she's not a bad person. She very much only takes from people who, let's go ahead and say, have abused her. Because when her single mother passed away, she was passed between different family members a lot, and none of them really wanted her, and quite a few of them were very cruel to her, and would take the money from the estate that she was owed, spend it all on themselves, and just leave her in a cupboard somewhere. It wasn't a good life for her. She's since been taken in by the character who you are staying with as the protagonist. She's not biologically related to him that we're aware of, although her father is unknown, and he did know her mother, but he's easily her real dad. never mind genetics. He's the one who looks after her and looks out for her and her best interests. She's not in school at the moment. She's the right age to be a first-year student at high school, but because of her problem with her post-trauma and her disabilities, she's not able to attend school at the moment. She has a run-in with social services where they criticise her adoptive father for not trying harder to get her into school. But she does have attending school as one of her recovery goals, so she's working on it, even if it doesn't seem like it at first to social services. So this is Haru. She's another rich heiress to a business, similar to Mitsuru from the first game that I covered, Persona 3. She is very sweet. She's sort of the perfect Hufflepuff. She really likes helping her friends. She wants her family business to be an ethical one. And she's deeply troubled by reports that her father, who owns the business, has been allowing maltreatment of his employees in pursuit of greater profit. She is deeply unhappy with it, but largely powerless to stop it, especially since her father seems to be intent on selling her off as a teenage bride to the son of another business mogul. And the Phantom Thieves intervene to try and help her get out of the situation and to try and stop her father from visiting any further abuses upon his employees. She's very conscientious, and she does her best to try not to be stingy or overly reserved because of the class difference between her and the rest of the Phantom Thieves. I feel like there is somewhat of a gap between her and the rest because of that class gap, but she really does her best to reach across it and close the gap as much as she can. So this is the character I mentioned who was released from spoiler jail. For the longest time, Atlas wouldn't own up to him being a Phantom Thief in public, even though he's on the box art. It's really important that you pay attention to him throughout the story, because he's a really important character. He's sort of set up as the foil to the protagonist. You can see in a lot of the art they're sort of set up as the black to each other's white and things like that. You can see on the slide I mentioned some of the themes that his story covers. He's got a devastating backstory, because of course he does. And I don't want people to go into it unawares. But he's a really good character. There's a reason he's so popular. Dude bros hate him. I'm not entirely sure why. I know why, but also I don't know why. I'm quite fond of him. Lots of people are quite fond of him. He's still pretty controversial in the fandom, even among people who agree that he's a good character. Bit of a discourse magnet. You probably shouldn't Google him in so much as, because he's quite involved in the main plot. When you Google his name, you're probably going to run across some plot spoilers in the same articles. So just be careful on that one. So this is Kasumi. She is exclusive to Persona 5 The Royal, which is coming out this month in March 2020 in the West. Pre-order it on Amazon, blah, blah, blah. They're not paying me, so they don't get a proper plug. She is vital to the new plot threads that are coming into Royal. She's a really interesting character. I know some of the details of her storyline from having the Japanese release translated for me by friends, and all I'm going to say is I think it's really good. if we have similar taste in storylines and characters, you will probably like her. When she was first sort of coming out and being talked about, a lot of people, like with Mari from Persona 4, started talking about her as though she's Mary Sue. But I think it's important to remember that just because a female character seems perfect doesn't mean that that's a writing mistake. It can be a plot point. So bear that in mind. Don't Google her at all. So as with the other games, there are important characters who aren't playable in the party. I'm not going to cover all the social links here. I'm just going to cover the ones that I think are most important to the main plot and which I think are just neat. So here are Caroline and Justine. Is it Caroline? They say it in the dub and I've forgotten. So unusually you get not only child attendants in the Velvet Room here, but you get twins. Two of them the same, mirror images of each other. They have different personalities. Igor is here as well. You can't see him in the picture, but as with Persona 3 and 4, the Velvet Room takes the form where Igor is sat in the middle, and in this game he doesn't help you fuse things. That's Caroline and Justine's jobs, because of the setup of the Velvet Room. They're the wardens who help with your rehabilitation, as it were, and he's just overseeing things. It's really funny because they keep talking about rehabilitation, but it mostly just seems to involve fusing personas together. They do force you to fuse your core persona as part of the main story plot, which is interesting because it's the first time that that's been done in the modern games. I don't know about the classic ones, but it does seem to be as much because they're trying to tell you from a gameplay perspective that you shouldn't be getting attached to individual personas and that you should be upgrading them by fusing them. So this is Sojiro. He is the best dad. He is a friend of the protagonist's parents. He agrees to take the protagonist in for a year while he's doing his conditional discharge. He seems to basically be running an informal home for wayward children because he's got an adopted daughter as well, who's also, should we say, a remedial case. He really does his best. He seems really cold to you at first, but it's almost because he knows he's too soft on the inside and he doesn't want to go too easy on you and end up spoiling you. He's a really solid, reliable character, and sort of a light in the darkness for the protagonist, I think. This is Sae. She's the older sister of the party member, Makoto. She's quite young for a lawyer. I believe she's in her early to mid-20s. It's completely possible in Japan, to pass the bar straight out of high school, as long as you can do it. The bar exam in Japan is ridiculously difficult, but you only need to do 1 year of legal apprenticeship before you can serve as a lawyer, and you can do that in your last year of high school if your school allows it. So it's not, it doesn't stand out as odd that she's a very young prosecutor, but it does mean that that and the fact that she's female means that she gets undermined by her colleagues and superiors quite a lot. She gets pushed around and I would say almost bullied by her employers, sent on jobs that they know that she'll never be able to complete, which is a lot of pressure when Japan has such a high conviction rate. You don't want to be the one lawyer that keeps losing out on things. She's extremely determined. She knows she has to work twice as hard to get half as far, and she's determined not to fall behind. This is Yuki Mishima. Everybody calls him Mishima. He even says that himself. He's kind of a dork. I kind of love him. he is a bit of a Marmite character. Some people hate him and think he's a creep. Some people relate to him and think he's a cinnamon roll. I would say the truth lies somewhere in between. He's a very realistic feeling teenager. He is an abuse victim. He was abused at school by his teacher. He is doing his best to cope and recover, but he's doing so completely without guidance. So things get a little bit interesting for him. Definitely do his social link. I think it resolves his character arc very well. So this is Takuto Maruki. He's one of the teachers, sort of, at the school that the protagonist and his friends go to. He's only in the royal version of the game that, again, is coming out March 2020. If they pay me, I will put an affiliate link in. He's really important to the new plot that's being added into Royal on top of the plot that was already in Persona 5. He's a genuinely nice guy. He's appointed as a therapist for the school after the whole debacle with the abusive teacher who was ousted. And he really sort of gets involved with the student base and making sure that they're okay and that things are improving for them. Don't Google him. Just don't. So, unlike Persona 4, Persona 5 hasn't been around for as long, but it does have quite a few. They started up the spin-off machine quite early and have been churning them out. But a lot of them, as of time of speaking, are either only out in Japan or they've yet to come out. So, let's see. We got Persona 5 The Royal, which, as I mentioned, is coming out in English in March 2020. It's similar to Persona 4 Golden and Persona 3 FES. It adds a new bit of the storyline, which will mean that it becomes the most complete version of Persona 5 that you can play. Persona 5 Scramble is interesting. It's a hack and slash game. It's available for the Switch and the PlayStation 4, and it's a story continuation from Persona 5, but as far as we can discern, it's a continuation from vanilla Persona 5. It doesn't incorporate the story aspects from Persona 5 Royal. So it's sort of a sequel, and sort of not so much, because Royal story elements are very important for character progression, and omitting them completely feels very odd. I'm still going to buy it, by the way. And then on the less canon side of things, we have Persona Q2 New Cinema Labyrinth, which has been stated to be non-canon in terms of affecting the storyline of the games. But it does feature the Persona 5 cast. It also features the Persona 4 and 3 casts as high schoolers all together at the same time, because the game sort of takes place outside of linear time passage. It also, unusually for a spin-off game, features the Persona 3 female protagonist alongside the male one, simultaneously existing, so that's very fun. Then there's Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight. It's similar to Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight. It's not canon in terms of events affecting things, but it does give you some character development. It gives you insight into how the characters think and how they spend their spare time. You get to see their bedrooms, that kind of thing. So, ironically, the only two that don't impact the plot are the only two that are out yet. So, I believe Persona 5 Royal is out in Japanese and it's coming out in English very soon. Persona 5 Scramble, I think it might be out in Japanese. It's certainly on the Switch network traffic to be data mined. Not that anyone would do that. It will be translated, but we don't have an English release date for it, I think. There are also 2 adaptations of Persona 5 that are actually finished. I'm not counting drama CDs, stage plays, anthologies. Those exist, but I'm not covering them in this slideshow. Persona 5, the animation, it's finished, but it's shit. Like, I tried so hard to like this animation. I really wanted it to be a good adaptation so that I could introduce my friends to this game that I love so much without them having to invest in a 150-hour RPG. But it just doesn't, it's just not there. It's like they distilled it, but they took the worst parts. It's like they distilled this alcohol and then threw the alcohol away and just kept the shitty, like, steam water. It's not good. It's not even fully complete because it actually ends on a bad ending. And if you want anything else, it's in a really rushed OVA. The quality of the animation deteriorates rapidly over the course of the series. And, like, you can't ignore it. It's not a good anime as a standalone thing, and it's a terrible adaptation compared to the source material. Persona 5 Daybreakers, is alright. It's only a short animation. It doesn't cover the whole plot, anywhere near the whole plot. It only covers one short mission. It's a really good introduction to the sort of general themes and the way that the group functions. It doesn't feature all of the characters. It only features about half of the party. But I would say it's worth watching. Even before you engage with the rest of Persona 5, I would recommend watching Persona 5 The Daybreakers. Not Persona 5 the animation. Yeah. There's also some developing media in the form of manga adaptations. So the Persona manga adaptations generally take about 10 years to finish. Persona 3 manga only finished, I think last year. Persona 4 manga definitely only finished last year. The Persona 5 manga is being done by a new mangaka, Murasaki Hisato. He is actually pretty solid. This is the second one on the slide I'm talking about, by the way. I really like the way that he's characterizing the protagonist. The thing is, barely half of the game has been adapted so far. I do recommend it, but you will not find a complete plot by this method yet. Talk to me again in 7 to 9 years and maybe we'll get there. It's not the mangaka's fault for working slowly. I think a lot of people who are looking at it and going, oh, the game came out 4 years ago, why have we only got to this part of the story, haven't realised how long these things take to serialise. Again, the previous Persona mangas all took a ridiculous amount of time to finish, and it's not because the mangaka was working slowly or because he wasn't good at his job. It's just because it's a really big, sprawling story, and if you want to tell it well, you do have to take your time. The top thing on the slide, Persona 5 Mementos Mission, is also an ongoing manga. It's a lot smaller in scope than the full adaptation. It's by Rokuro Saito, who did, if you remember, the Persona 4 Arena Ultimax adaptation. His artwork is gorgeous, his story writing is very solid, his character moments are amazing. Highly recommend it if you've already played the game or consumed it by some other manner. So, to recap, Mementos Mission, recommend for after the game. Persona 5 manga, I recommend, if you don't mind having an incomplete story and having to wait for updates to come out. They are both good. I do recommend them both. Anyway, that is the end. Just so you know, I did film all 4 of these videos in one go, in one take each, with no cuts and no editing except to remove the static from my microphone. I can talk forever about these games, so please feel free to hit up my social media. Please feel free to talk in the comments. I will be moderating comments for hateful discussion of characters, and also if you're mean to me, I will just nuke your comment. I won't respond or try and be witty. Don't go there. It's not fun for either of us. But in general, thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for letting me drone on for ages. Thank you for engaging with the content. Please do consider buying the game or the manga or the anime DVDs, particularly for Persona 3 and Persona 4, because they're really good. I really rate them. Make sure to catch your favourite streamers. Stream Persona 5 Royal when it comes out. Stream Persona 5 Scramble. They're both looking up to be really good games, and I strongly recommend them. So yeah, thank you for listening. And I don't know if I'll do anything like this again, but do let me know if you liked it, and I might consider doing another game that I'm into, like Final Fantasy XIV, or maybe something like the Spyro games. So see you around.